Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're digging into two stories from ancient texts. They seem pretty simple at first glance.
That's right. They're from the commentaries on the Dhammapada.
Exactly. But, don't let that simplicity fool you. We think they hold some really surprising, maybe even counterintuitive ideas about what it means to genuinely live by, well, deep principles.
Yeah, we're looking at these two elders, Ekudānatthera and Ekavihāritthera, and their way of doing things, it might look a bit odd even back then.
And that's kind of why we wanted to focus on them, because the source material presents these really fascinating details. So our mission today is to unpack these accounts.
Dig into them.
Yeah, dig in and see what nuggets of wisdom are hiding there about, practice, knowledge, even being alone.
What can these ancient figures maybe tell you about navigating things today?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. Elder Ekudānatthera. The scene is a quiet forest grove. He's living there alone.
And the detail that just jumps out from the sources is this. He apparently knew and only ever recited one single verse.
One verse. That's it.
Just one specific udana, an inspired utterance. The verse itself, it talks about being diligent, mindful, serene, free from sorrow, but still, just the one.
Wow. In a tradition packed with scriptures. And his routine on the observance day, the Uposatha, was also, well, different.
Totally. He'd announced the time for listening to the Dharma himself, out there in the grove.
To himself, basically.
Seems like it. And then he'd recite his one verse.
Okay, unusual, but here's where it gets really extraordinary.
Okay. The commentary says when he recited that one verse, the sound of Devas, deities applauding was, well, it was described as being like the earth crumbling. Just immense.
Earth crumbling applause for one verse. Okay, so picture this quiet grove, this solitary elder, this huge spiritual validation. And
then two very prominent monks show up. And these guys weren't minor figures. They knew the entire Tipitaka, the whole Buddhist canon, by heart.
the whole thing.
The whole thing. And importantly, the sources say each of them arrived with 550 followers. So suddenly, this huge crowd descends on the elder's quiet spot.
Quite the contrast.
Yeah.
So what happens? How do they interact?
Well, Elder Ekudānatthera welcomes them respectfully, and he actually says he'll listen to their Dharma talk. He offers them the floor.
Okay.
And the visiting monks, maybe noticing he's alone, ask, "Are there any listeners out here in the forest?"
And he just says,
He confirms, yeah. And he mentions the Devas and, their incredibly loud applause on these observance days.
yeah, so he sets the expectation.
Right. So the stage is set. These incredibly learned monks, the Tevijas, the ones who know all the texts, they speak extensively, reciting, explaining the Dharma in great detail, and silence, according to the source, absolute silence, not a single clap from the Devas.
Nothing. After all that knowledge shared.
Nothing. So naturally, the visiting monks are surprised. They even pointed out, where's that earth-crumbling applause you mentioned? Yeah. And Elder Ekudānatthera, very simply, suggests maybe he should recite.
Ah, the moment of truth.
Exactly. He sits down, gets ready, and recites his one verse. Instantly. Loud applause from the Devas, just like he said. Earth crumbling loud.
Wow. Okay, so how did the visitors take that? Especially the followers.
Oh, the followers were not happy. Not at all. They started complaining, quite loudly, actually. They basically accused the Devas of playing favorites.
Favorites.
Yeah, the term used is mukolakena, which kind of means looking at the face or showing partiality based on who it is, not what's said. They couldn't understand why this one verse got this huge reaction when their learned teacher's long talks got nothing.
They were focused on the quantity, the performance.
Completely. So they took this whole incident and reported it to the Buddha, the Satha, back at Jetavana Monastery.
And this leads to the core teaching of this story, right?
Yeah.
What the Buddha said about it.
Exactly. The Buddha's response is key. He stated very clearly he doesn't call someone a holder of the Dharma just because they talk a lot or know a lot of texts.
It's not about volume.
No. And he drove the point home with a verse, Dhammapada 259. It says, whoever, having heard little, sees the Dharma with the body, he is indeed a holder of the Dharma who does not neglect the Dharma.
Sees the Dharma with the body. That phrase really jumps out. What does the commentary tell us that means? Is it literal?
No, not literal physical sight. The commentary explains it means direct, personal, experiential realization. It's about understanding the meaning deep down, putting it into practice in your life, and actually realizing the truth, like the Four Noble Truths, through your own inner experience.
Like embodying it.
Exactly, embodying the wisdom. Sometimes it's linked to the Namakaya, the mental side of our being. It's wisdom lived, not just, known in your head.
Got it. And the last part, Who does not neglect the Dharma?
The commentary ties that to being energetic, putting in the effort, striving for that realization now. Not later, not tomorrow.
Like right now.
Yes, the term is aja asheva, today. Don't put off the practice. Be diligent.
That's quite a message. And what was the result of the Buddha explaining all this?
Well, the source notes that after this teaching, many people listening actually attained stages of awakening. So clearly this idea that real understanding comes from inner practice, not just book learning, hit home powerfully.
A very powerful distinction. Okay, let's shift to the second story then. Elder Ekavihārittherera. His thing wasn't about how much he knew, but how he was.
Right.
Precisely.
He was known for being solitary. The sources say he sat alone, walked alone, stood alone.
Even, it says, when he was technically in a group.
Yes, even when physically with others, he maintained this kind of solitary focus. It was his defining trait.
Which you can imagine might have looked a bit strange to the other monks in a communal setting.
It seems it did, because they actually reported his behavior to the Buddha, the Tathagata. Maybe they thought he was being aloof or antisocial.
Yeah, you'd think community interaction would be encouraged. So how did the Buddha react when they complained about him being too solitary?
This is another surprise. He didn't criticize him at all. Quite the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, the source says he responded with sadhu sadhu, which means well done, a strong endorsement.
He praised him for it.
He did. And then he specifically spoke about the benefits of solitude, the vivekanasasa.
So he completely validated this solitary path. And he gave a verse for this too, didn't he? Dhammapada 305.
That's the one. It goes, sitting alone, lying alone, walking alone diligently, alone taming oneself, one should delight in the forest's edge.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Deep solitude. What more does the commentary tell us about what that means in practice?
It adds some important nuance. Sitting alone, lying alone isn't just about being physically isolated. It's more about the inner state.
Okay.
It means maintaining focus on your meditation, your practice, your inner world, even if you're sitting in a hall with 1,000 other monks or lying on a fancy bed. It's about mental solitude, that unwavering inner focus, regardless of what's happening outside.
So the inner solitude is the key, but maybe the outer helps.
Exactly. And walking alone diligently reinforces that need for energetic, consistent effort in cultivating that focused state.
And the goal of all this solitary effort?
It's right there. Alone, taming oneself. That's the purpose. This focused practice, whether physically alone or mentally concentrated amidst others, is the way to tame the mind and achieve realization, magga phaladiga manavasena, as the commentary puts it.
Reaching the path and fruit. And the last line, delighting in the forest's edge. Why the forest specifically?
The commentary explains that while the inner state is primary, achieving this deep self-taming is just, well, much harder if you're constantly in crowded, noisy, distracting places.
Makes sense.
So the forest's edge represents seeking out or creating conditions, physical quiet, less distraction that support that necessary inner work. It's difficult for those the source calls akinhaviharna, those living amidst bustle.
So physical solitude is a valuable support for the essential mental solitude.
That seems to be the message, a powerful tool.
And, like the first story, what was the impact when the Buddha taught this?
Similar outcome. The source says after the Buddha explained the benefits of solitude, many listeners again attained stages of awakening. And it also inspired others. People apparently started wanting to cultivate that kind of focused, solitary practice like Ekavihārittheravatthu.
You know, when you put these two stories together, the parallels really stand out.
They really do, don't they? In both situations, you have the Buddha validating individuals whose practice looked maybe unconventional from the outside.
Yeah, Ekudānatthera, with his one verse against the scholars.
And Ekavihārittheravatthu being solitary instead of conventionally communal.
And in both cases, the Buddha just cuts through that external appearance. He focuses straight on the inner reality, the inner work.
It's clearly not about the quantity of scripture, or the amount of time you spend visibly participating in group activities. That's not the measure.
No, the shared message seems to be that genuine understanding, real spiritual growth, comes from that inner realization.
That's seeing with the body.
Right, experiencing the truth directly. And through dedicated, energetic self-cultivation, taming the mind.
And that second story really emphasizes that finding or creating space for focused attention solitude, whether physical or mental, isn't just okay. It's actually a powerful, Buddha-approved method for doing that essential inner work.
Now let's bring this home. Think about our lives today. I mean, we are absolutely swimming in information, aren't we?
Drowning sometimes, yeah. Articles, podcasts, social media, news feeds. It's endless.
And at the same time, there's this constant pressure, it feels like, to be connected, to be engaged, to be part of the group, to be visible.
Mm-hmm. Constantly performing our connections almost.
It feels like these old stories are speaking right into that modern situation. What do they say to you, listening now, about where genuine depth might actually be found amidst all that noise and demand?
Well, they certainly offer a strong counter-narrative, don't they? A challenge to the idea that just consuming more information automatically makes you wiser.
Or that being constantly plugged in socially is always the best thing for, figuring yourself out.
Exactly. These stories point towards something else, something internal.
So just to kind of wrap up this deep dive, that first story, Ekudānatthera, it's such a stark reminder, isn't it? Real wisdom isn't measured by how much you can talk about, but by how deeply you've realized it through your own practice.
Seeing with the body, not just reciting with the mouth. And the second story, Ekavihārittthera, it really highlights solitude, finding that quiet space both outside and inside as this incredibly valuable, validated tool for taming the mind and making real progress.
Yeah, together they really champion the value of turning inward, focusing on your direct experience and just diligently working on yourself.
Even if the world outside is maybe pushing you to just gather more facts or be constantly interacting.
Right, which brings us to a final thought for you to take away. In your own life, with all the information streaming past and all the calls on your attention, how could you consciously, intentionally create some moments for that deep focus?
Or for
Solitude.
even small moments. How might you cut through some of that external noise to find your own direct understanding, cultivate a bit more inner peace? What might that look like for you right now?